Hey, everybody. In this season's first episode of the Case Specific podcast, Maha and the FDA ban artificial food dyes, Steak and Shake replaces soybean oil with beef tallow, and why is there protein in everything?
We have a story of chia seeds gone wrong, and is cortisol face even a real thing? Join us.
Hi.
Look at our new space.
Look what you did.
I'm so proud of us.
I am too. It's crazy. Season 5, and we're finally a real podcast.
We finally have a real space. I really love that they matched the furniture to our logo.
Yeah.
So,
Here we are in the Case Specific podcast space.
and we have a new structure too, which I'm really excited about, which was sort of your brainchild. I'm going to give you 100% credit for this.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
But so new structure is that we are going to basically do about like 10 minutes on a few different topics. So of course, we're always going to cover what's the latest and greatest in the Maha movement, what's going on,
What's
and what
going
is
on
our
with Maha?
dietitian take on it. It's a hot topic a lot of our clients are talking to us about and asking us about. So we just figured it'd be helpful to just share it on a broader scale. We'll also talk about the latest pedestalized or, demonized ingredient. I feel like there's a lot of interest in specific ingredients and how that is the crux of all evil or of all wellness, right?
You will either be immortal or it will kill you instantly.
There's no in between, of course.
No, of course not. That
So,
is not how science works.
so we'll talk about the latest ingredient that everyone's talking about. We'll talk about a social media trend that's really hot right now because the world is social media. So many people are getting their nutrition information from social media, unfortunately.
It's job security for us, though. That is what we're here
Keeping us
for.
in business.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We're here to help navigate the chaos that is.
Then we'll have client story. So I've got a client story today.
Oh, you've got a good one today?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I can't wait to put on my mentoring dietitian hat and see if I can help you at all.
I just want to hear your reaction, honestly. That's what I'm looking for.
Deal.
And then a screaming from the rooftops. We've always got something that we would like to get on our soapbox and yell about.
When you own a company that sees about 3,000 people a month for health and wellness across the dietitian group, we have almost 30 RDs now.
Mm-hmm.
We all notice there's always trends in what we have to say. And you get to a point where in one of our satellite meetings, we'll be like, if I have to tell one more person, it's like, how can we tell thousands of people?
Yep.
Is this thing on? This is how we tell thousands of people.
Lastly, we'll have a product that we want to chat about.
Little product review action.
Maybe it's in this room with us right now. We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Can't tell how telling the cameras are at this point yet. We're still early on. We're still newbies.
All right.
But there you go. So that's our core 6. And so I'm excited about that. I think that that's going to be a lot of fun because it goes back to what we've recognized, why we really stepped back after season 4 and thank you all for your patience and said, hey, we've got some really good things in this podcast, like great content. We have, really committed listeners. We get great feedback. There were some things that we recognized they all really liked. And so it became this, okay, how can we really hone this in and make this a better, more useful product for the listeners out there, especially in a world where Maha is stirring the pot in all things health and wellness, and TikTok and Instagram are making influencers so empowered to peddle products and random ways of life that all of a sudden you start to see these like rapid trends. The Atkins diet, it took over a 7-year span because it was how slow information traveled. Now we have what feels like something every month.
Yep. And I also feel like scientists and doctors are sort of becoming celebrities, which is cool because, now we have these really knowledgeable people in the public eye. But then also, what happens when people become celebrities? Sometimes they get a little weird.
Well, especially when you recognize, and this, I always said, the reason I will never be a billionaire is because I will always preach moderation.
Yeah.
We are going to be the moderators of information. We are going to be pro-dialogue. We're going to be open to science and open to discussion and work on meeting people where we are. And that gray area and that nuance, it's not sexy. It's not exclamatory. It is right, though. And so, yeah, you get these famous doctors, but what's the number that it takes for them to sell out and start representing something that goes against their integrity, right? The Dr. Oz effect, if you will. At the end of the day, like, he is an example of someone that exceedingly brilliant in a lot of ways, but the Dr. Oz show was an absolute unethical mess. I mean, I worked at GNC in college when raspberry ketone was 6 months back ordered because he featured it on a show, and GNC never came out with their own version because there weren't human trials. It was all on rats. And then when they did human trials, it raised people's blood pressure. And Dr. Oz peddled that to the tune of millions of dollars before he had all of the info. And I don't care that you went to Columbia. I don't care that you were this amazing mentor and heart surgeon. I don't care that you wrote an amazing book on antioxidants. When you're in the limelight spewing nonsense. And so, yeah, we're going to be boring. We're going to try and make boring sexy. That's the goal.
Well, let's get into it, shall we?
Without further ado, let's do our first season 5 case-specific podcast episode with the new format, and we'll learn from the audience's responses. This is either going to go real well or it's going to just...
We will have spent all this money on this beautiful studio for nothing.
Exactly.
All right, so we wanted to start with MAHA, Make America Healthy Again. Something that recently came out was the FDA has decided to initiate the process to revoke authorization of certain food dyes, specifically red number 2 and orange B, within the coming months. We know that they're working with industries to eliminate 6 remaining synthetic dyes, mainly the petroleum-based ones. And it looks like they're going to have to remove these dyes sooner than 2027, 2028, which was the previous requirement. So that's a big update. And a lot of people want to know what we think about it. A lot of people are automatically, filing into their groups about it in terms of their opinion. But I want to know from the dietitian, what do you think?
I appreciate that. It is definitely... It made me laugh because the way it was brought out was like a WWE superstar, RFK out on a stage with fireworks presenting this massive win. I mean, the propaganda is real.
Yeah, there was a lot of marketing.
Yeah, and what I'm hoping to accomplish here is, let's call it what it is. We are currently in a very heightened time in America where the political teams are really battling it out in the most transparent, visceral, and emotional way that we've seen in modern history. I can't speak to prior to, but it's really, people are so intensely connected to their team. And what I'm hoping we can do is, again, be the moderators. So for one moment, as we discuss this, and as I will try to do anytime we talk MAHA, I'm going to try and take off the political lens of this and focus more on the actual policies and focus on what I like to call the dialogue, right? We, in a time long ago in a land far, far away, the concept of a Republican and a Democrat were 2 opposing views to a concept, and the point was to create political dialogue to help create the biggest win-win possible and help the most people. Now it's just 2 very triggered sides having screaming matches, and that dysfunction is what enrages me, especially when we're trying to make the world a better place. So for a moment, we're going to take our boxing mitts off, and we're actually going to have the conversation.
And let's talk about dietitians. What we're trained to do is to be able to read and interpret and make recommendations based on evidence. And so, political opinions aside, I just want to know, what do you think based on the evidence? Do you think this was a good move?
That's a great question. And the short answer is yes. I do think that this is a net positive. That's the way I would, if I was going to try and step back from this without practice any whataboutisms, like what about this or what about this or what about this. We can go down those rabbit holes, and we'll touch on some of them today, and I'm sure we'll see some of them in the comments, and I definitely will see some in my DMs and in my office as well. But if we just boil it down to brass tacks, will this be a net positive? The answer is yes. Is it the most important issue in our current health and wellness? And I'll even say specifically within nutrition, is it the most effective and important and impactful thing we could have done? Not by a mile. Like, it is so far, which I think that's a lot of the criticism, is it feels like a side quest.
Mm-hmm.
But I will also note that to end a war, you often have to start with a ceasefire. And so small things can sometimes be the precursor to bigger things. And especially when we recognize that we are very early on in this new concept of MAHA and shaking up these industries, it is far too soon to be grading this group on how well they changed policy, because they haven't been able to change it, let alone enact new, let alone watch the second and third order consequences of the new, to actually ask the question, did it? But in 5 years, do I think we're going to look back at the removal of them and say that it was a net positive? I do. Do I think there's going to be some questions that need answered along the way? Yes. If it was the only policy that passed from a nutrition standpoint, that means that this would be a legitimate, it would be a win amongst a failure, right? Like, not all battles are blowouts. You know, you can still win a couple and still lose the big picture. And that's why I say, I hope we can zoom out for a second and kind of take our hats off and say, hey, what is this actually aspiring to and trying to accomplish? And how much of this is a small talk to get the FDA engaging with the food industry differently that might be a catalyst to bigger and more important conversations? We don't know that. I would love, because I'm a hopeful person and I want the world to get better and I want people to have better lives, I'm hoping that that's what this is going to evolve into. I definitely am in a place where I rolled my eyes at all the pomp and propaganda and circumstance, celebrating a win before it's even a reality, acting like it's the win itself, when reality is that we have a lot of work to do. And really, it's almost like we wrote out the plan of the first chapter of a 100 chapter plan and then took the time to celebrate that planning session. And while I like to celebrate small wins, right, incremental steps to change with clients, I do want to see more, for sure.
Yeah. And I can really empathize with people who are scared about certain additives in their food, such as food dyes, because they're not nutrition experts, so they don't understand what they are or could they be harmful or not. And I think there's a lot of loss of trust with our bureaucratic systems. Again, not to get too political about it, but I can really empathize with that fear. And I can also respect the fact that, you know, you get to choose whether or not you're going to cook at home or, you know, go out to a fast food restaurant, but you don't get so much control about the additives that are in your food. And especially if you don't understand what those are, even if they're things like riboflavin, which is B12, by the way, a vitamin, I could understand why that would be scary. So I just want to empathize with those folks. And another thing I hear from a lot of my clients is, well, why are all of these ingredients and additives banned in the UK or in Europe, but they're legal here? I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the pieces when we talk about the second and third order consequences. You end up hearing both sides in this screaming match talking about research, but they're cherry picking research to justify their own baseline. And the bigger question is the way we study the things we put in our food advantageous to actual measures of health outcomes over time? Recognizing that health outcomes aren't a 1 month, 3 month, 6 month, 12-month trial, right? They need to be longer. And unfortunately, we can't wait that long. And so we have created a world of research where we're trying to get some key indicators, and then we're kind of extrapolating data, hoping that it's aimed the right direction. And I think when you compare and it's going to vary across whatever, you know, the different things we're talking about, whether we're talking about like vaccinations or medications or talking about foods across nations. So I'm going to stay 1,000-foot view zoomed out here. I don't want to get too lost in the weeds on this, but it's to say that if you compare the current process that is required for Americans or the United States for companies in the US to get something on the GRAS list, generally recognized as safe, compared to the process it takes to get an ingredient approved in Europe, it's scary. Like, the GRAS was meant to be, in true American way, expeditious, and expeditious can create bad outcomes. And so what's interesting is there's kind of a fun sort of visual where you can pronounce something innocent until proven guilty or something guilty until proven innocent. Well, like when it comes to people, innocent until proven guilty is a good idea. But when it comes to ingredients, is innocent until proven guilty really the right path? And that is the core question. And I don't even know that we need to make a declarative answer about that. But I think it's good that we are asking, is the GRAS standard actually a positive? And ultimately, you have to get to a place when you recognize the autoimmune disorders, the obesity, the chronic disease, all of these health problems that we are having in an exponentially domineering way by compared to any other nation. We are clearly doing something differently. It is 100% multifactorial, which means we are doing many things differently. And you do have to start somewhere. And when it comes to food dyes, if we zoom back in for a moment, we have not researched them in the way that you can say with pure confidence, they do not have negative downstream consequences. Generally recognized as safe does not eliminate them from what we don't know yet. And so it gets to a place where, what is their benefit? There is none.
Yeah.
What is their potential harm? We think there's none, but we also know that there's clearly something, and it has to be in some part food. It's not just that we don't take subways and we walk less. I mean, movement's definitely a piece. Stress, sleep. We can get into the plight that is the grind mode American, but our food, caloric excess is definitely a part of it. Food quality, food timing, food balance, ingredients are definitely a part of it. And so the food dyes getting removed, what will be interesting to see is what's the harm in removing them? And I want to touch on that because I think there's, rightfully so, there's anytime someone moves something, if it's that book, Who Moved My Cheese, there's an immediately feeling of uncertainty in it. There's the what good can come from it and what bad can come from it.
Sorry, I've never heard of this book.
Oh, that is a really good book. I'm not going to fractal.
Sorry,
I'm not going to do that.
continue.
But it is to say that it's that idea of whenever something changes, people are very resistant to change, and people don't like change that they weren't a part of in some ways. And I do think a lot of the frustrations about this currently is more of people playing a team sport, right? I would honestly ask a lot of people, hey, if you're really politically charged one way or the other, and your team isn't currently in charge. So like Democrats right now, ask yourself, this is an honest, especially practitioners, like, if your group had done this policy, would you have had the same negative response? Or would you have assumed that it was in the best interest because it was with the people you trust? So how much of this...
The benefit of the doubt is huge.
So how much of this is literally political bias, which is the thing that I'm going to do my best to pull people from, because we ultimately are people trying to improve the greater good. And so politics aside, will this improve the greater good? And I think the chances are, when we look at this 5 years from now, it won't have done harm, but it's possible that it will have done good. And I think that it's even more possible that it will have been a starting point that will drive conversations that have the potential to create more good. Now, I'm not a psychic, and so there could be downstream consequences that do come to light. And so some of the ones that I know that are of concern is, okay, they are going to replace these food dyes with food dyes. One, are those food dyes better researched? Are those food dyes safe?
Are they sustainable to feed a population?
Yep. And then...
not that they offer nutritive value, but you know what I mean,
yeah.
in terms of manufacturing.
That one becomes more of a supply and demand question, which is, does it change the price? And so when you think about something like this, are we forcing manufacturers to change the ingredients in a way that could be negative from a health perspective? Possibly is what I'll say is possibly, but not likely, noting that there are a ton of alternatives and many of them are like natural additives. When you look at the Fruit Loops in Canada versus here, like they are not nearly as bright, but they use things like, vegetable coloring, basically.
Beet juice.
Yes. Which when you think about a lot of the more, holistic and health-focused products out there that already exist, when you go to Whole Foods, that's kind of what it's already doing. And so what I'll notice is Whole Foods more expensive than Giant Eagle in Pittsburgh? No, it's not. And so do we have those ingredients? Yes. Is some of it going to be that we're not even replacing it, we're just getting rid of it? Are things going to be tanner? Right? Our
is our food going to be more blah looking?
Is it going to be more bland, which maybe that'll encourage people to eat real colorful things instead of fake colorful things. So I do think there's going to be a loss of this ingredient, or some things are just going to get rid of ingredients. That sounds like a great thing. Some of them are going to replace them. I do think, from my understanding, we have a good list of alternatives. And from will those things be more expensive or cause the product to go up in price? If so, it's going to be insignificant,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not likely to be true over time, because as the demand for those things increase, the dye companies that are currently selling dye are eventually going to be selling carrot extract.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that orange dye that we're getting rid of, that they currently inject in the skin of oranges to make them look more orange in the grocery store, so you want to buy them, which is like, why are we mad that we're getting rid of that? Can we just for a moment, like I said, like that is an isolated thing. Like, yeah, stop, please.
Yeah. So weird bone to pick.
Yeah, maybe we just like don't inject oranges with artificial coloring of any kind. Maybe we don't need to extract carrot coloring and then inject it into oranges. Maybe we just don't inject the oranges in the first place. So that's when I say there's a lot of these where it's going to be the removal of something without the replacement.
Mm-hmm.
For the things that it is a replacement, it's likely going to be a replacement that already exists and is well researched and has been vetted by other nations in a much more stringent allowance process. Because in this specific topic, other nations are a bit more strict because of the grass loophole that is in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, I understand the concern of price. We are in a deflationary, deleveraging period of the economic cycle. We are in what feels like a recession. We are post-inflation, which that's what the deflationary comment is. People feel tight. Money is tight. Families are struggling. The middle class is feeling it. Pretty much everybody is feeling it. And so anything that's going to change about our food makes us worried that our access to food is going to change. And I hear that, but I also want to make sure that we're not living in fears that are just rooted in purely uncertainty, noting that right now, if you go to a Whole Foods, none of these ingredients are in their food already. And so that's the comment I'll make is 10 years ago, Whole Foods was obnoxiously expensive compared to Giant Eagle. Now it's cheaper in my experience when I go there. So I don't see this having that same downstream effect. And so we will see. Like at the end of the day, we've got to see them actually come through and enact the policies and work with the groups to have the conversations, and we'll see what kind of negotiations happen. So it's too soon to even declare this as a set in stone thing. We're watching this current administration. One thing that you have to be blind not to see is that they talk big to drive conversations, and then they go to the negotiation table from that big talk posture, and then they make real things happen that are not as extreme as the original, right? It's this pomp and circumstance, then it's back to the middle. And so we didn't get to see the middle. We just saw the pomp and circumstance. Let's see what the FDA and these food companies actually come up with. Let's see the policy that follows. But just from what I've seen in other nations and what I see with something like what I like to call the Whole Foods experiment, this isn't something we should be worried about. This has a chance to be a net positive. And my pure hope is that it is a start of conversations that can then get to more productive topics that actually really, really, truly impact change in a massive way. Yeah. So hopefully this is the start of something. This isn't the big thing that you're going to put on your chest and declare success from.
Totally. That's a great take. And so just to kind of summarize, it sounds like, was it a positive? Probably, yeah. Will there be downstream effects of it? We'll have to see, but it sounds like it's likely that what might replace it is probably going to be likely safer, less likely to impact the actual nutrient quality of any of the foods. And yeah, it's definitely not the most important thing, but it is something that hopefully will drive future conversations. And I mean, what I would like to see is more true experts at the table. Beautifully and I think because so many of the experts have taken such a hard stance against, it's really hard for us to kind of come together on this. And so
people are so in their emotions, and whether it's their own personal experience, which, like you said, some of the experts that are in the MAHA, I think one of the big criticisms is it's a bunch of really passionate people that may not actually have the medical background, but have personal stories that have charged them. Yep. So how much of what they're doing is rooted in personal experience, which is not a great extrapolation to the population at large.
Especially because a lot of those people don't have the same type of struggles as most everyday Americans, especially lower income Americans who are highly impacted by things like this. Like what we were chatting about a little bit before, and this is just kind of my personal take, is that a lot of the people who are on this committee are people who are avid, they eat healthily, they exercise, they're doing a lot of the basics. And so they've reached a point where it's like, what's next? Yeah. And it's like, maybe these food additives are the next step for them, whereas it is so minusculely important when we're comparing it to what most Americans need the most help with. They need help with eating more whole foods based. They need, more physical activity. How much are they going to benefit from this versus other things? I think that's what people's big, pushback
right.
is against this. And we have to kind of understand where they're coming from. I think we could do a better job as the nutrition experts of meeting them at the table and saying, hey, I'm a nutrition expert and I have some thoughts on what I think would really make Americans healthier, and just kind of trying to bridge that gap, come alongside to actually have more of an impact, because we are the experts.
Yeah, you can hear why I said I come from a stance of pro-dialogue. There's more to this conversation.
Of course.
And I'm not discouraging people that are frustrated by this to not be vocal.
Yeah.
I'm encouraging them to step back from their emotional biases to the best of their ability. Is it a personal experience that has you horrifically biased? And this is both sides of the aisle, right? Whether it's the people that are in the Maha movement that are charged by their own personal thing and have a vendetta that's based on purely their own familial reality, or whether it's practitioners or people on the quote unquote other side of this that feel some sort of personal bias. It could also be that you have a political bias, and that is something that it is up to you to be aware of, at least, so that you're bringing legitimate value to the conversation. It's really interesting when you see dietitians diminishing this, when they are the same people that get frustrated by a client that says, so like tilapia is bad for me, right? Because salmon has more omega-3s, right? How often as dietitians do we have clients that practice that this, not that, whataboutism kind of scenario where, yes, salmon is a great protein source and super rich in omega-3s. Does that make it better than a tilapia that is a rich protein source and has some omega-3s? Does that make chicken completely worthless because it has no omega-3s?
Right.
And so it's really weird to watch the political bias cause someone who professionally gets frustrated by people minimizing good things.
Right.
Is this a good thing by
this
itself?
Wasn't a bad move just because it wasn't the most important move.
Well said. And I would say out loud that the most important moves, it's not that they aren't on the table, it's that they're infinitely more complex. Have you ever started your workday by checking your inbox? Is it completely a waste of time? No, it's a warm up to get your brain going. Right. So I'm not going to criticize you if your first 15 minutes of the day is checking your inbox, because at least you're getting some work done. If you don't dive into your biggest and most most intense project right away, that doesn't mean you're failing. And that's where I think there is sometimes that extreme criticism lens, and that criticism is not very well rooted in actual progress. It's rooted in, most of the time, someone that's actively just rooting for the person that did this to lose.
It's situationally primed for criticism.
Like, you have to ask yourself to a certain extent, like, do you want this administration to succeed? And I hope the answer is yes. Even if you didn't vote for them, even if you don't like them, in 4 years, if the world is a better place, that is a good thing. And this is who we have now. And so I, regardless of political preference and affiliation, I am now on the team of America that's trying to make our people happier and healthier. And I'm going to be vocal. Part of the reason why I wanted to do this, why I gave you the green light to make this real, is I realized that as a moderator, I owe it to the current community to be louder. And part of it's that I'm arrogant of my own opinion. And I think that I have good processes. I shouldn't say I'm arrogant of my own opinion, because that's not true. I am confident, potentially to the point of arrogance, of how I process information, because my opinion will be swayed based on what it comes through the process. So it's more my process than it is the outcome.
The questioner in you.
Yeah. I analyze things very well, and I like how I analyze things. And if enough people like how I analyze things, this show is going to do really well. So it's to say, part of the reason, though, that I said, hey, let's level this up, is I realized that right now, squeaky wheels need to be squeaking, right? Political dialogue needs to happen. There are big stirrings taking place. We need to hear from everybody. People that are worried about the cost of food for low-income people, they need to be loud, right? People that are worried about the legitimacy of the ingredient alternatives, they need to be loud. But they need to be loud from a place of genuine progress. All of us need to realize that we are ultimately on the same team, trying to get to the same outcome. And just because you may have opposing views, that doesn't make this person your enemy, right? It makes them the opposite perspective.
Gives you the opportunity to sharpen your ideas.
Better ideas are typically a synthesis, right? I have my hypothesis, and let's say you and I have a bit differing viewpoints. Then you have the antithesis to my hypothesis. If you and I work together well, we're going to create the synthesis. And my idea is probably 50% correct. your idea is probably 50% correct. So if we did only one of them, we're going to help 50% of people. If you and I work together well, we're likely going to help 80 or 90% of people.
Yeah.
Not likely to help 100. 50 and 50, unfortunately, doesn't usually make 100. But it is to say 50 is not as good as 80 or 90. And so now is the time to be loud. But I would encourage people to check why they're being loud, what the actual concern is, what's the thing behind the thing, and make sure that when you're being loud, you're being what I like to call productively loud. This is me screaming from the rooftops and being louder, and it's being louder in what I hope to be a productive way. Because ultimately, I give credit to the perspectives out there that are cautionary of radical change. I understand that, and I think we need to hear it. If everyone went quiet and change just went unchecked, we're back to the hypothesis. We're back to 50%. So we need both, but we need both to actually be constructively progressive and productive. And I'm not seeing a lot of constructive criticism. I'm seeing a lot of destructive criticism. And that really frustrates me, not as like a Maha hat wearing guy, but as somebody that is 1,000 feet up watching this and going, this could go well if we got on the same page. And the same page doesn't mean we agree. Got on the same page meant we were willing to realize that negotiation and discussion is what creates the best outcome.
And that we have the same goal.
Well said.
Making people healthier.
Yep. Let's get on the same page.
We said we were going to spend 10 minutes on that.
I know. Luckily, some of these other ones aren't 10 minutes. I think Maha is probably going to be a bigger hunk of our episodes. And also this was a big piece of it.
First time we're really diving into it in a meaningful way. So that was exciting. Yeah. And man, I have more opinions and we will keep talking about it. So do you.
Keep your opinions coming.
Okay, so next would be pedestalized ingredient that everyone seems to be talking about.
Speaking of Maha,
beef tallow. So we know Steak and Shake just swapped out their frying oils from a seed oil to beef tallow in response to some of the recommendations that are being rolled out by Maha. What do we think? What do we think about this change? Is this radically going to improve Americans' health? The beef tallow?
You nailed it. You know, the obesity epidemic was definitely because of the fat that we were frying the French fries in at the fast food restaurant.
And that's the clip that's going to go viral.
Yep, that was the thing. That's what's, exactly.
We're being sarcastic, guys.
Yeah, exactly. I hope I have a decent sarcastic tone when I say that. But it is to say this is something that is kind of laughable, actually. It's not really newsworthy, and I really hope we don't spend 20 minutes on it, but I do want to tie it into the bigger combo of seed oils a little bit, which is an important piece. Beef tallow makes French fries way tastier. It used to be what we fried almost everything in, and then when we went low fat in the 90s, we started switching from butters to margarine. The food industry came out with all sorts of butter alternatives.
Hydrogenated oils, which is basically like turning an unsaturated fat into sort of like a saturated fat.
Yeah.
Not so great.
And then that's where the trans fats then came from. And so it's to say that it's kind of like how fanny packs got cool again. Like beef tallow's just been
old is new.
Yeah, exactly. It's been 40 years, so it's time to bring it back. But what I will say, at base, beef tallow makes French fries a lot tastier. So Steak and Shake is likely going to have more purchases because the fries taste better.
And also marketing.
Yes. Is there a different amount of fat from the beef tallow that penetrates the potato in the French fry? No. The seed oils and the beef tallow are going to embed an equal amount of fat in the French fry, which means the French fry is going to be a starch, a carbohydrate dominant food that is basically being bombarded with oils, whether beef-based oils or seed-based oils, and it is going to create a calorically dense, hyper-palatable food.
Yeah, that is not very nutritionally dense.
Correct. And so are we in a place where the calories went down? No. So from a purely thermodynamic standpoint, will someone that's been eating Steak and Shake for lunch and dinner every day for the next 12 months suddenly start losing weight because they switched from beef tallow or from soybean oil and canola oil to beef tallow? No. Will they like the taste of the French fries better? Probably. Will their lipid panel change? Maybe, but it's likely going to be some people's will get worse and some people's will get better. Beef tallow is really high in saturated fat, which absolutely does have a relation to our LDL going up. When we see things like the soybean oils and canola oils, they are loaded with a bunch of omega-6 that have also been shown to raise LDL. The problem is so much of the data that gets tossed around, the quote unquote research that gets tossed around, is really just rooted in the fact that most of the studies have been observing the trends in our society with the underlying fact that calories have been way in abundance. The average American, and there's different food frequency studies that show, but they offer a range that averages around 3,400 to 3,600 calories a day intake is the average American's consumption.
And I will say the current food supply has roughly 4,000 calories available per American. And I think we can both agree that most Americans don't need 4,000 calories, nor do they need that range that you just mentioned, around 3,400 to 3,600 calories.
Need 20 or 18, we'll say 1,800 to 2,600 would be a pretty typical non-active person range, but it's well below those numbers we're citing. So
I love to give a shout out to Marian Nessel. She's a nutrition professor at NYU. She always says food companies are not social services. They want you to buy their food. So if there's 4,000 calories available, they want to make sure that you as an American eat as close to that 4,000 as possible, not because they're malicious and trying to make you unhealthy, but because they want to sell their food.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like you said, there may not be intentional malice. There's just second and third order downstream consequences of a capitalistic food environment that's incentivized by selling more. And that means trying to make it tastier. That means trying to cut margins. That means doing all the things that we've watched our food model do. And we've gotten to a tipping point where we go, oh, we've been profit seeking, margin cutting, ruining the quality of food long enough that we're starting to see like undeniable frankenfood and consequence from it. And that's not meant to be this like massively controversial statement. It's pretty obvious just from a neutral glance. It's fairly biased. But so it's to say that, coming back to the tallow, the bigger problem is caloric excess, right? That's, if we're going to really boil it down, most people are simply eating too much. And
Steak and shake fries are calorically excessive.
Dense. And when you eat a high fat food, your transporters, your HDL and LDL and VLDL, which are lipoprotein transporters, will increase. And so seed oil, canola oil, or tallow is not likely to have a massive or meaningful difference in the lipid profile of the American. Hypercholesterolemia, high cholesterol, is likely still ready to run rampant. I don't think you're going, and again, calorically, you're not going to see a decrease. So we start to go, okay, because there's two comments, there is such thing as the quality of fat impacting the lipid panel, and then there's the quantity of the calorie affecting the lipid panel. Caloric excess, lipids are going to be high. So we're not correcting the caloric excess with this, which means lipids are still going to be high for most people. Quality of fat, it's kind of a null. It's comparing two things that are different, but not, they're both, C's in terms of quality. And so we're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul kind of thing as a way to think about it. It really isn't going to be this massive step forward. The takeaway is the fries will taste better. So that's a win. But I don't think that if the entire fast food world switched to beef tallow, I don't know that we would see a massive improvement in really any meaningful health metric or financial metric or cost. It seems
there's no health cost savings there. Americans are not necessarily any healthier for it.
Yes.
It's a trend.
Yes. And it's
a company getting caught up in a trend based on some policies that are getting rolled out.
And that's where ultimately there are hundreds of fatty acids that exist, different types of fats, and we group them into saturated and then poly and mono unsaturated for the most part. And so when you switch from something that's highly, some of the polyunsaturateds that are not as great for something that's highly saturated, and it's not really the saturateds that are great, you're changing the fatty acid profile, but not in a meaningful way. We're not seeing that increase in MUFAs, the monounsaturated fats that are in avocados and in olives and those in nuts and seeds. You're not seeing a radical increase in omega-3s. And then what I'll note is the beef tallow steak and shake is using isn't from grass-fed beef, where grass-fed beef is going to have a higher lauric acid count.
Yep.
Lauric acid is a saturated fat that is high in, it's an MCT, it's a medium chain triglyceride. So made super simple for those, we'll use my hands for a visual, right? You have a saturated fat that is just this like straight chain. And so it is super hard to break in half. You have a monounsaturated fat, which is already partially broken. So it's easy to bust off. A medium chain triglyceride is already in half. And so medium chain triglycerides do not have the same effect as some of the other saturated fats. Beef that is grass-fed and lives in a free-range model and isn't overfed will have a higher concentration of lauric acid in its body, which means you will end up consuming more lauric acid from it, which that's where like grass-fed butter does have more lauric acid. The higher lauric acid means more MCT. MCT means less liver strain to try and break it down. That does have an impact on lipids in a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so it is to note the beef tallow that's being used is not likely from that source. So I don't think we're not trading off seed oils for an MCT
For
rich
avocados.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so it really does feel like it's just kind of it's a fun namesake shift. And I'd say like, hey, it probably makes the fries taste better.
Yeah. Well, shout out to Steak and Shake.
Yeah.
Go try their fries, I guess.
We'll see. We'll find out. Maybe they're
taste.
the next healthy fast food restaurant. Who knows?
Maybe. All right. Next, the latest social media trend.
Oh man.
Is protein everything.
Why are they putting protein in everything?
Specifically, I sent you a meme that was related to Khloe Kardashian's latest like protein popcorn.
Yeah, what's it called? Cloud popcorn.
Cloud popcorn. And it's like, we've got protein popcorn, we've got protein soup, we've got protein ice cream, we've got protein everything.
Yeah, protein Pop-Tarts.
Is there so much thing as too much protein? Why are we putting protein in everything?
I love that question. And I died when you sent me that. That was fantastic. This is going to be one of our favorite ones because it's going to give you and I excuse to send funny nutrition memes to each other. I was laughing when I saw the popcorn because it boasts 7 grams and it's like, hey, regular popcorn at the same serving has 3.
Yep.
So
it's
like
naturally a whole grains naturally have some protein
we're
in
sprinkling some protein powder on some popcorn and
calling it a wellness food.
Yeah. And so let's zoom out for a second. Let's talk about protein because yes, there is technically a tipping point in our body where protein is excessive and it strains our kidneys and can impair function. No one is realistically getting that level of protein. That's kind of, I will say concisely, that is sort of irrelevant and out of the scope of concern here.
Right. We're not talking about people with kidney disease right now,
yeah.
right?
Well, and people,
who truly may need to limit.
People with like progressed kidney disease, they actually have to limit protein. You and I as healthy individuals, though, if I consume 350 grams of protein a day, for years, it is very likely that there would be extra protein in my urine because it's just too much. Protein molecules are huge. That can affect the kidney a little bit. So it could wear and tear my kidneys. And if I was born with kidneys that were meant to live to 120, is it possible I start having deteriorating kidney function at 70 when I otherwise wouldn't have? Yes. But that comes from people consuming probably triple what we're currently aiming for. So we're not really having that combo. It's really just you start to go, well, this is coming from, it has genuine intentions and then it's just been absolutely
bastardized.
Yes, exactly. That's the perfect word for it, to a pulp. And so protein is a couple things for us, right? It is the amino acids that make us build things. So it is what helps us build our skin and our fingernails and our muscles, right? It helps us make certain hormones and certain neurotransmitters. We use amino acids as the building block of life.
It also slows digestion and helps us keep us full and satisfied in between meals.
And that's where a lot of this comes from, right? Is you need enough protein to make sure you're repairing your body and you're keeping youthful, we'll call it, right? And vibrant. Protein is also what digests in the stomach. So when we think about the elevators of the intestine, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, your stomach getting protein closes the stomach, secretes acid. And in that process, you are slowing digestion, feeling more full. And so protein getting added to things is oftentimes trying to make things more filling. It's also in combat of, it goes back to the hypothesis antithesis. where we have been eating as a society such a convenience diet. People want to grab and go. People want portable things. People eat with a fork once a day, not 3 times a day. And so in this hyper palatable, hyper portable, convenient based food model, we see that protein disappears because protein is not typically handheld. And so we end up with a diet that is really high in mostly carbohydrates that are then crisped with refined oils to make a hypercaloric, hyperpalatable, convenient item.
Or beef tallow.
Yeah, I guess now it'll be in beef tallow. Yeah, even though that would make it too greasy, so people probably wouldn't use it, which is why they would go back to the hydrogenated oils that make it less greasy. See where this becomes a fun combo? But it is to say that the reinsertion of protein back into the diet is a great idea because we're putting back something that really is underconsumed. Now, would it be much better to be putting it back using a knife and a fork? Yes. Ideally, we'd recognize that the problem is that we live such fast-paced lives, and in the same time, we deprioritize food.
Yep. It is
way
like
too often.
Just fuel and not like an intentional break in your day.
Well said. And so in an ideal world, we'd get back to meals as an exhale, as
Slow
a break in the day.
food movement.
Yeah, that would be the ultimate win. A meal that has all the ingredients. Putting protein back in things is definitely going to make them a bit more filling, which I don't hate that as an idea because we can find that carbohydrates don't digest in the stomach, and so they don't really drive satisfaction. They give us energy. So a diet that's high in really easy to digest, energizing food is going to be overconsumed and create excess energy, which is what we're kind of staring in the face. Moving protein back in is going to slow digestion down. It's going to reduce carbohydrate, which will balance it out. That is one step in the right direction. The better step being actually really eating real food. And so I do like the intention of it. I think there's some value in it, but it is kind of funny how everything has to be protein now. And it is worth noting, it's just like right now, the carnivore diet is like the latest trend. And that's something I don't doubt we'll dig into here soon because it is a tool in a toolbox that has some short-term metabolic benefits and has long-term metabolic consequences. So if you are someone that does not understand what I just said, please come talk to a dietitian. We're not anti-carnivore, but like you need to fully understand what you're grappling with. It is not as easy as just do this and it works forever, but it is this ridiculously, it's like basically a meat-only diet, which is the antithesis to like the vegan plant-based trend. And what I would argue is even the antithesis to like the low protein standard American diet. Like you just get to a point where we go, oh, well, maybe it's all meat. And it's what I was saying before. Hypothesis, antithesis, guess what? The middle is the synthesis, and that's usually where the right answer lies. And so you're going from the standard American diet, which is low in protein, high in refined carbohydrates and oils, straight over to a diet that's all plants all the time or all meat all the time. You're sailing right past the right answer, better known as moderation. And so,
hallelujah.
And so I do think that the protein stuff is funny. I do think that it has some potential value. I will say one of my big complaints is it's kind of like the cauliflower thing. You remember when cauliflower alternatives got popular like 10 years ago?
You used to be able to go days without hearing about cauliflower or protein.
Yeah. And for me, it was like, you have someone be like, hey, here's cauliflower mashed potatoes. It's like, no, it's just mashed cauliflower. Like it doesn't have the texture of potatoes. It's not potatoes. And then be like, oh, I just made cauliflower wings. It's like, no, you made like sauteed, seasoned, flavored cauliflower. Like we like to pretend things are things, and it makes me laugh where you go like, can you just like let some food be good tasting? So like sometimes when you make a protein, the one you sent me where it showed like this soup that was like 30 grams of protein and it just looked like it was stuffed with sawdust. And it's like
from all the protein powder in it.
You ruined the soup. Like, and so I that's my big thing is it's like, hey, I get the initiative. I do think that more people need to be prioritizing protein and decreasing refined carbohydrates and all of that. I also would love to see an increase in produce in conjunction with this.
Say like the fiber is the new protein.
Yep. And so we're eventually going to live in a world where everyone's making protein fiber hacks that you're like, hey, you could just like eat protein and vegetables. It's like, that's way too time consuming.
Well, yeah. I mean, like, so I had a client this week who was like, I have like a protein shake and a protein bar every day. Am I cheating? And I was like, No, you are still very much getting protein.
Yeah.
But also, if most of your protein is coming from these convenient sources, let's talk about why your life is that busy that you're relying on these convenient sources for most of your protein
the
intake.
Only thing. Yes, I'm all for having convenience, and I like when convenient options are better, and I like when they're made and they actually taste good, because that is, along the way, some of them, you lose some in terms of quality.
It tastes like clay.
Or they have the texture that's just awful. So it's like, I'm all for having convenient options that are delicious and nutritious.
Mm-hmm.
So when we can find those wins, we can find them. I do think as a net, people prioritizing protein has a more positive outlook than what currently is. So again, if we're not careful, we're going to do what we just did we accuse people of back with Maha, which is like, is this a net positive? Yes. Is it kind of funny along
overkill?
the way?
Also,
Potentially.
yeah, probably.
Also, yes. Also, probably. Do we have to keep everything? And are there any foods that are allowed to not be protein hybridized? The
protein apple. The protein banana.
Exactly. Protein fruit. And you're just like, can we keep fruit? That's my request, actually. If they start making
fruit, that's the line.
Protein injected apples, that's when I quit.
Make fruit again.
Yeah, make fruit again. Oh, I love it so much.
We've really gone down the rabbit hole.
That's okay. We can write the ship. But that one, I definitely enjoy it. I will say, though, that I think this topic probably can take us into one of the things I know we're going to cover today, which is one of your scream from the rooftops, noting that part of the problem is that people don't get enough protein, and that leads to excess calories. But then there's this other thing happening in our society right now that's causing people to not get enough protein, and that is the rampant use of max dosage GLP-1s like Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, and Zepbound.
Yep.
These medications close the stomach prematurely to make people feel more full, so they eat less and they create a caloric deficit from under eating.
Yes.
But they also oftentimes will feel hyper nauseous when they try and eat protein, which means they're not consuming protein. And what is that doing to people that's making you want to stand on the top of the case specific tower and just tell the world, this is here, I'm going to do this.
This is my moment. This is what I would like to shout from the rooftops. My folks that are on GLP-1s, I need you to be strength training. I need you to be doing some type of resistance exercise, because I am really concerned when I am doing body composition analysis in the office and assessing how their body composition is changing in response to this drug. I am seeing a loss of way too much muscle.
Yeah.
And I am not a strength and conditioning coach, but I am a dietitian, and I know the effects of strength training on the body and on body composition. And what I will tell you is that when you are in a caloric deficit, which is part of what the GLP-1s help to create and how it affects weight loss, and again, I said weight loss, not fat loss, is it pulls from your tissues. It breaks down tissues to metabolize for energy, and therefore, because it's pulling from those tissues, you lose weight. Now, let's just visualize like two different buckets. We've got our bucket that's our body fat, and we've got our bucket that's our muscle tissue. And if you're not strength training, if you're not eating enough protein, your body's just going to break down both to a certain extent, right? But if you are strength training, and I don't care if it's air squats, wherever you are in your strength training journey, I just need you to be doing something, moving weight against gravity. Resisting in some capacity. You are signaling to that tissue, hey, you're necessary. We need to keep you. So you're more likely to be able to keep this tissue, this muscle tissue that is so important. If we are on a GLP-1 drug to improve our health, which I am hoping that that's the reason that we're doing it, right? We need to be prioritizing keeping that muscle tissue. So that is my big shout from the rooftops, because again, I'm seeing my clients lose weight and they're excited about that. And I want to, celebrate that if it's, an improvement in their metabolic health. But we need to also acknowledge the fact that if we're just draining our muscle mass, and the older we get, the harder it is to be able to put on that muscle mass, especially my women who are peri or postmenopausal, or they have a decline in estrogen, they have a harder time putting on that muscle. It is so, so important that we keep that as much as we possibly can. And one of the best ways to do that is to strength train. So again, I'm not a strength and conditioning coach, but I recommend that you find one. We've got some great ones at Case Specific Athletics. Shout out.
We do, absolutely. And they do all with the mobile app. They've got the online training and all that good stuff too.
And so that was like just a side little plug. But
yeah, thank you for
strength
that
training.
One.
And that just doesn't go for my GLP-1 folks. That is anyone.
I'm
hoping that anyone is making an effort. If it's not the first thing, maybe it's just starting with walking. I'm hoping you get to strength training eventually, because it is so important.
Yeah, muscle loss is real. And just to double back on the GLPs, If your goal is weight loss, you likely need to ask, is my goal weight loss at all costs, or is it fat loss? What am I actually trying to do here? Most people are trying to lose body fat because they have more than their body needs, and it's causing some sort of negative consequence, whether it's impaired movement and joint issues, or whether it's actually causing metabolic concerns like insulin resistance, hypercholesterolemia.
Or it's putting you at risk for those future concerns, even if you don't have those
Yeah, you're trying to get
a
jump on them because you don't want to wait until it's already a problem. And so the comment is, if you are on a fat loss journey, then you should be in the game of losing fat. And if you go on these meds at max dose and don't really prioritize the lifestyle components, you are, as Devon said so well, going to lose all of the above. And at the end of your weight loss, you'll have lost, and this is the law of averages, but it's to say generally, 33% water, 33% muscle, 33% fat. And so if we could have if we're talking about 100-pound fat loss that is 33 pounds of fat, or you could have a 35-pound fat loss that is 35 pounds on the scale, which one of those is better for you? And it's, the pure fat loss. Keeping the muscle and keeping the bone density and keeping all of those things is a net positive. Our society is so lighter and faster is better. So the faster you lose, the better. Wrong, right? The faster you lose, the more of it is likely to be muscle and water. And then the more you lose, the better. Also wrong. Changing your body composition is a fat down, muscle up, or muscle stable equation, which means I'd rather it be pure fat, right? 35 pounds of pure fat on a 35-pound weight loss, or even a 40-pound weight loss, because there's always some water in there, versus 33 pounds of fat on a 100-pound, where you're just withering away. And now, is that 40-pound one going to take longer than the 100-pound one? Probably, but you're going to be thriving at the end. And that's, you got to think about, like, what are you actually trying to accomplish? There's some really good strength and conditioning studies with the GLPs where they're showing you can flip from 75% water and muscle loss and 25% fat loss to 25% water and muscle loss and 75% fat loss by strength training for 30 minutes, 3 days a week. Strength training for 3 minutes or 30 minutes, 3 days a week. Put on a weighted vest and do some squats, or just do some body weight stuff, especially if you're in a bigger body. You already have resistance built into you as a human because of gravity. And then if you have extra weight, that means you're carrying around weight that isn't helping you. Well, right now, let's let it help you. Let it be your resistance, and let's start doing step lunges or squats or doing flights of stairs or whatever it is. Get that muscle protected. I love how you described that. And let your progress be measured by the fat loss and the muscle maintenance. So instead of feeling like you've just like wilted away and you're fragile and now you're thinner, but instead of dealing with diabetes, you're going to deal with bone fractures. Now we're in a place where you're actually thriving. You have the muscle to be able to do the things. You've removed the extra fat that was impeding those things. And now you're actually living a healthy lifestyle. So I love that one. And that is where a lot of these protein foods can be helpful, right? Because that's some of these things, they will go down more easily than a chicken breast. Like it's people that are on these meds, like the idea of eating meat is like nauseating. And so a protein smoothie or a freaking protein Pop-Tart, like if that's what you got to do, that's what you got to do. Like
I know you love the protein Pop-Tarts.
They're fun. They're fun. I don't eat them often, but yeah, every once in a while. The other comment I'll make is I also like haven't had a real Pop-Tart in so long that I don't even know what I'm missing.
Yeah,
so
see, I eat regular Pop-Tarts way more often than you do.
Yeah, exactly.
So when I tasted yours, I was like,
you're like, nah. You were like, this is so good.
This ain't it.
It just had a little sawdust in it, is what you're telling me.
A little sawdust.
Yeah, you know me. If I'm going to have fun with food, it's not typically the sweet stuff. It's more savory.
I respect it.
I appreciate you.
All right. So next is a client story.
Oh, I got to be ready for this. It sounds like
I have a client story you have not heard yet. So this client gave me permission to change some information about them so I can share this story. And it involves chia seeds. And this I share to teach a lesson, word to the wise, because I see a lot of weird stuff on TikTok. I need to make sure that you all are not doing this. So this client of mine, she asked me in session a few weeks ago, she said, Devon, I've heard about this thing called chia seed water, where you add a few tablespoons of chia seeds to your water and you drink it and it helps you stay full and satisfied and it's good for your gut health.
We're going to start putting fiber in everything. You called it. I know where this is going, I think. I'm going to listen.
And I said, don't do that. That is not going to help with your constipation issue. And what did she do? What do you think she did?
Oh, she listened. She didn't listen to you. She did it. She had to try it.
She totally did the chia seed water, which at worst you would think maybe gave her some really severe constipation. But my client ended up in the hospital with a small bowel obstruction because chia seeds, for those of you who don't know, contain soluble fiber, and they form a gel in the gut when they're combined with water. So if you've ever added them to water and you've seen them create that gel-like structure, they also do that in your inside. So this client of mine drank this chia seed water, and the chia seeds actually formed what's called a bezoar, or like a kind of like a blockage in the gut, and so she had to have it surgically removed.
Oh my
so
gosh.
This is a prime example. I feel like a mom just like wagging my finger.
Yeah, it was one of those I told you so's that you didn't want to have to do.
One of the I told you so's that I didn't want to have to share.
You can't always prevent the kid from breaking their arm. That's really what you can parent them, but you can't always prevent them from climbing the tree and breaking their arm.
And I'm only sharing this because she is okay. She's totally okay now.
That is a good note.
Learned the lesson, unfortunately, the hard way.
Yeah.
All that to say, don't do the chia seed water. If you're going to add chia seeds to your food, I'm going to say max 1 to 2 tablespoons max per meal, because of how it forms that gel-like structure. Yeah. Right? It's a wellness food. It's great. It's high in omega-3s. It is high in that soluble fiber. Soluble fiber is good for the gut health, but there is such a thing as too much when it comes to chia seeds, especially. So that's my client's story. I wanted your reaction.
That's such a it just makes me think of it's our tendency of more is better. It's the protein concept. It's like protein's good, so let's put it in everything. Fiber is good, let's put it in everything. Chia seeds are high in omega-3s and fiber and protein. They're a superfood because they have more than one thing to brag about. Noting that when we say high in protein, we're like 3 grams a serving, but nonetheless, let's put them in everything. Food is a balancing act. And so, yes, more protein to a certain point is good. And then there's such a thing as too much. There is such a thing as too much fiber. There is such a thing as too much omega-3. You can thin your blood to a distressing degree. And so keep in mind that part of our role, I always say, right, is we are here to moderate. And that's because health really can feel like a tightrope. Too much or too little, right? It's why all my posts, if anyone's ever seen my little baby bear, I always do the baby bear. It's the Goldilocks approach. Like mom and dad always liked it too hot and cold. Baby bear did it just right. We're always trying to baby bear this. And that's where she didn't baby bear it.
Yep.
She went in hot.
She came in hot with the fiber and the chia seeds. And I think fiber especially is one of those Goldilocks scenarios where it's like slow and steady. Let's slowly increase our fiber intake. And definitely we don't ever need that many chia seeds in one sitting.
Yeah, that's it. That is a distressing amount of chia seeds. That, oh God, I am so sad that they had to go to the hospital, but glad they're okay. And that is definitely one of those moments where you just realize can't always convince them to do what you want. You can give them the recommendation though, and that is we're here preaching the boring gray nuance, helping people walk the tightrope. Doesn't mean they'll always listen to us, right? It's how many times have I said sometimes you got to go keto to figure out blueberries weren't the problem. Exactly. That's just sometimes people like to collect the extremes. From the extremes, you establish a spectrum, and from a spectrum, you can then figure out where you are on the spectrum. And if that's the path you need to walk, I'm happy to be the Sherpa that helps you pro and con your way through.
Yep.
That made me think of a client as well.
Do we
have the time? Can I share a quick one? Because this is it. Actually, now that I think about it, it is completely relevant to our topic. Our next topic. So I have a client that had a bad ashwagandha experience. And so for those of you out there that are obsessed with cortisol, we're going to talk about that here in a second. But the thing I want to make sure I say is that cortisol is essential. It is a messenger, right? It tells the brain, basically it's the brain telling the adrenal glands, we are in danger. So we have a lot of pressure or whatever it is, it activates our fight or flight or our stress response. And so if you've got a deadline, if you have a lot going on, if you're really busy, if you're actually in physical danger, your brain will send cortisol down to your adrenal, which will trigger the production of adrenaline and epinephrine, putting you in fight or flight, making your blood more efficient, your muscles more efficient, making everything about your system more efficient for survival. Cortisol, when it's not saving you from a tiger, is the reason you have stable blood pressure. It's the reason certain immune functions work. It has a basal job other than survival. So cortisol at 0, you die. So let me say that for everyone out there that doesn't understand cortisol, cortisol is essential in our overly busy, do a million things, always plugged in lifestyles. It's overly prevalent because of your lifestyle. And it also is the messenger. The actual issue is that you're running on adrenaline.
It's not the root cause. The root cause is more likely your lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I had a client that started taking ashwagandha during a stressful time of life, which is not inherently a bad idea, right? Cortisol was high, stress, fight or flight, early mornings, all the things. The ashwagandha was really helpful. Life changed, kept taking the ashwagandha. All of a sudden starts having hypotension, like 75/45 blood pressures, passing out randomly in the middle of the day. Can't figure out what's happening. And then finally, it's oh yeah, my friend had told me to take this ashwagandha. Could that be it? It's like, yeah, because ashwagandha inhibits cortisol. And so if your cortisol was high, it was probably reducing it to a normal value. But if your cortisol was normal, it was crashing her cortisol. Yeah. And so that's a client story that I think we can usher in. I know we were going to chat about cortisol today a little bit, but that's some of the baseline stuff of, hey, cortisol is good for you at base. This is another example of where not all supplements are right for everybody, like different things for different people and in different circumstances.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Whew, man. All right. Well, what do you think? Maybe we save cortisol for next time? Is that okay? Or do you want to get into it?
I think we should.
We have some time.
Where are we at? How are we time wise?
We're about an hour in.
We're an hour
and 5.
Let's cut it to let's cut it to 10 minutes then, and we'll keep it short. I think we already talked about some of the big pieces.
Yeah.
What did you want to talk about with cortisol?
I wanted to hear what your thoughts on, because this is like another one of those social media trends, is cortisol face. You weren't ugly. You just had cortisol face, and it's like you see these before and after photos of people with maybe like slightly rounder features versus not, and yeah, what do you think about that?
You are not a machine. You are not a robot. You are a biologic organism that is 65% water. And so your body will function not mechanically, which means it won't look the same and act the same and respond the same all the time. Your body is biologic, which means it sways with its environment. We are full of hormones and all sorts of things. And so cortisol is the transporter, not the transporter, the communicator or messenger. It's the Paul Revere, right? It's the thing that the brain sends to the adrenal glands that says, we are in danger.
Be alert.
Be alert. Use adrenaline. Most people nowadays, thankfully, don't get chased by tigers, but we live very quote unquote busy lives. And I'll say we live stressful lives, and then people like lash out. I'm not stressed. It's like, yeah, sounds like it. Super convincing. To call someone stressed in our culture is to call them incompetent or incapable. They feel like you're telling them they're like not strong enough. When I say someone's stressed, I mean they're running physiologically on stress hormones. And as someone that spent most of my younger years literally living on adrenaline, it's funny because my friends always were amazed that I only needed 4 to 5 hours of sleep, and I was always so productive, and the
never
business
needed
grew
caffeine.
so fast, and I never needed caffeine. I didn't use it because if I did, it made me feel like an elephant was sitting on my chest. And you start to go, oh, I was running on a ton of adrenaline. No wonder I was having panic attacks in the middle of the night and hyperventilating and get heart palpitations. Like I was running. So as someone, it's all to say, as someone that's been in like a massively cortisol-induced, adrenaline-induced state of fight or flight, at that time, if people had called me stressed, I would have done the same thing. But just something for you to think about as listeners is, if you are busy, if you are checking the boxes on your grind and you're clocked into life, and it's, it can be the job and the kids and the marriage and the, all the things. If you are clocked in and doing all the things, your brain can only be focused naturally for so long. And if you're clocked in 16 hours a day to life, you are using adrenaline.
Especially if you're constantly task switching, which I think a lot of us are. I've heard some crazy statistics on how often people check their emails in a day. And that is the classic quintessential example, I would say, of task switching, which is just keeping
that
you.
Book note. Yeah, you do it to get to the next thing. It also can become like a neurotic tick for a lot of people. It's the how many people can resonate with, like, they open a social media app and then they close it and then they open it up again.
Yeah, or you step onto an elevator and you just like instinctively.
Yeah, like just those little things, but
Yeah, anyway,
fractal.
sorry.
But it's to say that, from a cortisol perspective, let's keep in mind the whole point of it originally was you're being chased by a tiger. You need to escape harm. So let's put the body in a state of like hyper awareness and hyper agility, because if we don't, we're dead.
Mm-hmm.
Short term, that's a great idea. And so it, like I said, increases blood sugar into the blood, which that increased blood sugar in the blood helps it get closer to the muscles so the muscles can fire better. It turns off water in the kidneys, which basically causes and that's an oversimplified way to say that, but it basically helps you retain water so you become a camel short term, so that you have more fluid and can survive running from the tiger, and also so that you don't have to stop and pee. It inhibits stomach acid because, digesting, not a great idea. It's a redirection of blood flow away from the muscles.
Reprioritization towards, your really crucial organs, such as your brain and your heart and your lungs.
Correct. Exactly. So instead of blood to stomach, it's blood outward. Also, probably don't need to be throwing up or stopping to throw up. Sounds like a good way to leave a trail for the tiger and also get attacked by the tiger mid-throw up. And so you can hear...
It all comes back to this dang tiger.
It's the tiger. And now it's our inbox. But regardless, the tiger causes these short-term events. Those events in the short term make a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. But if the tiger is your day-to-day life and you live in that for weeks, months, and years, that means you are living in a perpetual state of higher blood sugar and eventually insulin resistance, impaired digestion and eventual IBS, water retention, which creates eventual swelling and puffiness. And so cortisol face is an observation that you are currently living a lifestyle that is not optimal for you. And the fix for that is to figure out how to turn off the busy.
You mean it's not buy my de-bloat supplements?
Yeah, exactly. You start to, it's like, man, if we did the
Discount
actual
code in my
work,
bio?
Yeah. It's link in bio for 15% off. It's like, that sounds altruistic for sure. Man, she gives a discount. She's trying to save the world. The hard work, the real work, is to identify how busy and why you're busy, why that busy feels so pressured. And then you may not be able to turn off the busy. You may legitimately have a high demand reality. And from there, you have a couple things. You can work on your perspective to it, which is something I had to do. I lived in the to-do listing of this company. And when you own a business, you never clock out. But I learned to clock out, and I learned to shift my thinking from things that I identified as pressure to not being pressured. So like I had to do a lot of internal shifting, and I would call that breaking alignment with my external world. My external world goes 1,000,000 miles an hour. Internally, I'm going 60. I'm cruising. I'm just chilling. I'm not trying to keep up with the external world. I open the door to take things from the external world and bring them into my pace. I don't let my world set my pace. I set my pace. And I say that from a place of both practice and privilege, which is to say I own my own business, so I'm going to be unrelatable to some for that reason. But I also probably am a busier human than most humans. But when I say the practice is the thing that everyone can do, I got better at this. I wasn't naturally good at this. I had to practice it. So yeah, most people, instead of the 15% off cream from the bleeding heart influencer that's trying to save the world one affiliate note at a time, we could probably take a hard look at what are you dealing with? Is there a way to time optimize, de-stress yourself? Is there a way to mindset shift to change the perspective of your stress? And is there a place where we could start plugging in true outlets, true exhales, things that aren't negative coping mechanisms like drinking the Friday night away and then setting yourself backwards because you're hungover all weekend and fall behind, but instead things like taking walks, prioritizing eating with a fork and enjoying your food. Nice lifestyle things can be insanely valuable.
So just to be clear, cortisol face, not a clinical diagnosis, but it is true that when your cortisol is elevated, you tend to retain more water. You might look or feel a little bit puffier. That makes a lot of sense. The answer is not the next supplement or cream or whatever.
Yeah, it's not to kill your cortisol. Also noting, this is what's kind of funny, we're going back to the ashwagandha. If you're currently using that much adrenaline to function in your life, to cut the cortisol is to cut the adrenaline. which means you're not going to be able to do anything anymore. So people take ashwagandha a lot of the time and they just fall behind.
Which causes them to be more stressed and need
exactly.
more
And so again, I always say it's a short-term prop, which is like, hey, maybe let's like force calm your body for a hot sec. But can we also like talk about the lifestyle that may be necessary to like, and again, you're not going to be able to be in a perpetual state of calm, but there's definitely, we can be better than we currently are at this. We have to be able to be better than we currently are.
And I always tell my clients, never a pill without a skill.
Ooh.
So if we
can we stop? Hold on. Wait a second. Did you see, you've been doing this long enough. You're starting to get those one-liners.
I'm starting to pick up on your little one-liners.
Yo, never a pill without a skill. Yo, give me that. Yup.
I think it's super important because yes, people are looking for what can I take to help with my stress? And I'm like, we can talk about that, but let's also talk about what you're going to do, because there's avoidable life stress and then there's very much the unavoidable life stress. And the reason why I think a lot of my clients are like, I feel like you're my nutrition therapist, and I am not a therapist. I would never claim to be a therapist. But the reason I think that maybe they feel that way is because I am always asking them like, well, why is it so hard for you to stop and eat lunch? Or like, why is it that you're consistently not getting breakfast? Like, what is it about your life? I'm not just going to sit there and finger wag and tell you that you should do it without inquiring why this is so hard for you. And then we kind of get into how stressful their life is. And sometimes there is the short-term, semi-unavoidable stress. Like we have a sick parent that we're caring for, right? That is like some real stress that a lot of my clients are going through. And something like ashwagandha might be a helpful short-term, like, helper. But I also am like, we're also going to practice this breathing exercise.
How did we get here? Right. How do we poke holes in how we're here? How do we change our reality?
Exactly.
Let's use this to help prop it up while we practice the things that maybe take a little bit longer.
Exactly. So
I love that. But yeah, so that's cortisol face is definitely a sign that you've been living in a busy state and you've been living in an adrenaline dominant state for an extended period of time. The answer is to change that.
And also, a little face puffiness is not always the result of cortisol, let's say. It could be the result of
time of the month,
the Chinese food I ate on Friday.
Yeah, it could be. Again, we are a giant sack of bones with water. Like, can we like recognize again?
There's the line.
Yeah, there's the line, right? We are a giant sack of bones with water. That
just a
changes.
Bone bag full of
just a bag of bones. It's real morbid. Anyway, we're not going to go down that route. But it's your water, but especially women, the infradian rhythm, right? Your infradian rhythm, which is your menstrual cycle. You are going to have periods where water is up and water is down during that.
By the way, what is it like to be a man and feel the same every day? What is that like?
I plead the fifth. Awesome.
That's why. There it is.
And with that, we have officially gotten canceled for the day. So I think we've just wrapped up episode 1.
All right. Well, that was that. I'm glad we're here. We're doing it.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We really appreciate it. We are super excited about this episode and this season. Please, as you have been, this is great. Keep DMing us, keep emailing us, send us your topic ideas. Every month, we are going to go through those core 6. They're going to be obviously different each time. But if there's a trend you want us to cover on social media, if there's a personal story you want us to share, if there's something going on in the world of Maha, or if there's an ingredient that you want to know if it's as good as that you think it is, please let us know. And then obviously any dietitians out there, if you have something you want to scream from the rooftops, let us know.
You let us know. With that, you can follow us. You can subscribe if you want to get alerts for when new episodes come out. We're going to be doing this at least monthly with maybe a few extra little deep dive bonus episodes here and there. But make sure to follow us on at Case Specific Nutrition. And you can find us wherever you listen to your podcasts at the Case Specific Podcast.
Be well, everybody.